They laughed at his torn uniform, mocked his broken shoes, and left him humiliated in front of everyone. Broken heart, what no one knew was that this poor kid, the one they shamed the most, would one day rise higher than all of them and build an empire worth billions. The classroom buzzed with noise as the students rushed to their seats. Among them entered Daniel, clutching his second-hand bag with both hands. His uniform was faded, the once white shirt now dull gray, and his shoes had small holes at the front where his toes peeked through. The whispers started immediately. "Look at those shoes," one boy muttered, nudging his friend. "Does he live in a trash can?" Another girl laughed loudly. Daniel kept his head down. His cheeks burned, but he didn't respond. He walked straight to the last bench, hoping to disappear into the corner. But humiliation had a way of following him like a shadow. When the teacher called him to solve a problem on the board, Daniel walked to the front. As he turned, the entire class could see the holes in his shoes. Giggles spread through the room like wildfire. Someone whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Careful, his shoes might fall apart before he reaches the board." The class erupted in laughter. Daniel's hands trembled as he held the chalk. He wanted to run away, but he forced himself to solve the problem. When he finished, he turned to face the class. His answer was correct. Yet no one noticed his intelligence, only his shoes. At lunch, Daniel sat alone with a simple sandwich his mother had packed, 2 slices of bread and a thin layer of butter. The other kids shared fries, burgers, and laughter, but Daniel sat quietly staring at his food. His stomach growled, but his pride kept him silent. What no one saw was the battle he fought every day outside school. His mother worked 2 jobs after his father's death, barely making enough to pay rent. Daniel often wore the same shirt for days, washing it at night and hoping it dried by morning. That evening, as he walked home, a group of classmates trailed behind him. They threw pebbles at his shoes, chanting, "Hey, billionaire! Don't forget us when you're rich." Their words cut deep, but instead of crying, Daniel clenched his fists. He walked faster, not letting them see his pain. When he reached home, he found his mother sorting through old newspapers. Among them, one headline caught his eye. "Teen invents simple app, becomes millionaire overnight." Daniel's heart skipped. He grabbed the paper, reading every line. For the first time, he saw a crack in the wall that trapped him. A way out. He looked down at his broken shoes, then back at the newspaper. "If he can do it, why can't I?" he whispered. And in that moment, the humiliation that had once crushed him began to transform into a burning fire. The night after Daniel discovered the newspaper article, sleep barely touched his eyes. He lay on his thin mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling of their apartment, the sound of passing cars filtering through the broken window frame. The headline kept replaying in his mind. "Teen invents simple app, becomes millionaire overnight." It wasn't just a story to him, it was a message. A possibility. If someone his age could break through, maybe his life didn't have to remain this way. Daniel rose from bed quietly, not wanting to wake his mother, who was asleep on the couch after a long day of cleaning houses. He tiptoed to their small kitchen where the dim yellow bulb flickered. On the table lay the old newspapers his mother collected to reuse. Daniel spread them out, searching for anything else about success stories, innovations, or businesses. He read every headline carefully, his eyes burning with curiosity. He didn't fully understand how apps worked or how businesses grew, but the idea of creating something that people valued, that thought lit a fire in his chest. That night he scribbled a single sentence in his old, nearly torn notebook. "I will not always be poor. I will find a way." The next morning at school, Daniel couldn't focus on lectures. His mind wandered. While his classmates passed jokes and shared snacks, Daniel secretly jotted down ideas. What did people need? What problems could he solve? He noticed how students often complained about forgetting homework, misplacing notes, or struggling to prepare for exams. An idea began to form. What if there was a way to organize all that in one place? After school, instead of going straight home, Daniel visited the public library. It was free, quiet, and warm. He spent hours reading books about business, technology, and entrepreneurship. Most of it was difficult for him to understand, but he didn't give up. He copied quotes that inspired him. Great things never come from comfort zones. Success is walking from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. Each word fed his hunger. Back at home, Daniel's mother noticed the change. "Daniel, you're spending too much time at the library," she said one evening as she folded laundry. "I'm worried. You should rest." You've got schoolwork. He smiled faintly. Mom, I'm learning something important. Something that might change our lives. She sighed, brushing his hair gently. Your father used to say the same. Just promise me you won't stop dreaming, Daniel, but also don't stop studying. Her tired eyes carried both hope and fear. Daniel hugged her tightly. I'll make you proud, Mom. One day. Every day, Daniel's old shoes reminded him of his place in the world. They squeaked with every step and the sole was almost detached. Some students had stopped laughing, but others never missed a chance. One afternoon, as he walked out of class, a boy from the basketball team pointed at his shoes and shouted, "Hey Daniel, those antiques belong in a museum." The hallway erupted in laughter. Daniel paused for a moment. His fists tightened. But instead of reacting, he simply said, "Remember this moment. One day you'll know my name for a different reason." Everyone laughed harder, but in Daniel's heart those words were not empty, they were a promise. But promises didn't pay the bills. Daniel needed money to even begin experimenting. So he started small. Using scraps of paper and colorful pens his mother collected from her cleaning jobs, Daniel made handmade bookmarks with motivational quotes he copied from the library. The next day at school, during lunch, he quietly showed them to a few classmates. "What's this?" one asked, raising an eyebrow. "Bookmarks," Daniel said nervously. "I wrote some quotes. Maybe they'll inspire you." The boy smirked but handed him a coin. "Not bad. I'll buy one." By the end of the week, Daniel had sold 8 bookmarks. It wasn't much, but for the first time in his life, he felt the thrill of earning something from his own effort. Encouraged, Daniel looked for more ways. He noticed a younger student struggling with math in the library. "Need help?" Daniel asked. The boy hesitated. "I'm terrible at this." Daniel sat down and explained patiently. After an hour, the boy's face lit up. "I get it now. Thank you." The next day, the boy's mother approached Daniel. "You helped my son?" "Thank you. I can't pay much, but maybe a little each week." Daniel agreed. It was only a few coins, but it meant food on the table and another lesson. Knowledge could be valuable. Weeks passed and Daniel combined his little hustles, bookmarks, tutoring, odd errands for neighbors. Slowly, he saved coins in a jar under his bed. Every time he looked at the jar, his dream grew louder. At night, with his second-hand notebooks, Daniel began sketching the idea of an education app, a place where students could store notes, track homework, and get simple explanations for tough subjects. He didn't know how to code, but he knew what he wanted. One rainy afternoon, Daniel spotted an old computer shop. Dusty second-hand desktops lined the window. His eyes locked onto a small, outdated laptop with a crack near the corner. He asked the shopkeeper, "How much is that one?" The man chuckled. "That junk, $40. Daniel counted his savings that night. He had $27. It wasn't enough. But instead of giving up, he offered to clean the shop after school in exchange for a discount. The shopkeeper agreed reluctantly. After 2 weeks of sweeping floors, Daniel finally owned the broken laptop. To him, it wasn't junk, it was his first tool of freedom. Electricity often cut out in their apartment, but Daniel didn't stop. He lit a candle and sat by the window, typing slowly on the cracked keyboard. He searched free tutorials, copied code line by line, and made countless mistakes. Sometimes the laptop overheated, and sometimes he fell asleep at the desk. But each day he learned something new. One evening, as he worked late, his mother stood quietly at the doorway. She watched her son, his eyes focused, his fingers typing despite the flickering light. She whispered softly, "Maybe, just maybe, he will break this cycle." Daniel didn't hear her. He was lost in his dream, lost in a world where humiliation didn't define him. In his mind, the image of laughing classmates transformed into a different vision, crowds applauding him on a big stage, cameras flashing, and headlines with his name. Daniel's mornings had changed. While most of his classmates still arrived at school half asleep, Daniel's eyes glowed with a hidden energy. He would wake up before sunrise, finish his chores, and then sit at the cracked laptop, typing, failing, correcting, learning. His notebook was now filled with diagrams, flowcharts of how an app could work, lists of features students needed, and notes about bugs he couldn't yet fix. Every mistake only pushed him harder. At school, Daniel still wore his old uniform and squeaky shoes. The teasing hadn't fully stopped. "Still dreaming, Daniel?" one boy said as he shoved past him in the hallway. That computer of yours won't make you rich. It's trash, just like your shoes. Daniel didn't reply this time. He smiled faintly and whispered to himself, wait and see. The library had become Daniel's second home. The old librarian, Mrs. Hargrove, noticed him every evening. You're here again, young man? She asked kindly. Yes, Daniel replied. I'm building something. She chuckled. Building? Without tools? Daniel showed her his scribbled app sketches. Her eyes widened. You've got vision, child. Take this, it might help. She handed him a discarded programming manual that no one borrowed anymore. For Daniel, it was like gold. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, Daniel built a basic version of his idea. It was clunky, full of errors, and crashed often, but it worked. The app allowed students to store homework assignments, set reminders for deadlines, share quick notes with friends. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One night, Daniel stared at the glowing screen and whispered, This is the beginning. Eager to test his creation, Daniel showed it to a few classmates. Look, it can remind you about homework, he said. One boy laughed. Why would I need that? I've got a brain. Another shrugged. Doesn't look cool. Nobody's going to use this. Their words stung. Daniel closed the laptop quietly. For a moment, doubt crept in, maybe they were right. But deep inside, a stronger voice answered, they laughed at your shoes too. That didn't stop you. A week later, a shy girl named Emily from his class approached him in the library. Daniel, can I try your app? She asked nervously. Daniel hesitated, then handed her the laptop. She entered her assignments, pressed a button, and gasped as the reminder popped up. This is amazing, she said. Do you know how many times I forget homework? This will save me. Her excitement fueled him. For the first time, someone believed in his creation. Motivated, Daniel worked harder. He added colors, improved the design, and fixed the bugs. Emily became his first tester, giving feedback every day. Soon, a few more students secretly downloaded it. Word began to spread, not about Daniel's shoes this time, but about his useful little app. Every year, the school held a science and innovation fair. Students presented projects from volcano experiments to small robots. For the first time, Daniel decided to participate. When he signed up, the teacher raised an eyebrow. Daniel? You're joining? What will you present? My app, he said firmly. The teacher smirked. Well, let's see if it works. The day of the fair arrived. Stalls were decorated with colorful charts and models. Daniel had only his old laptop, a few handwritten posters, and trembling hands. When it was his turn, whispers filled the room. That's the boy with the old shoes. What's he even going to show? Daniel took a deep breath. His mother was in the crowd, wearing her faded dress, smiling nervously. He couldn't fail her. He clicked the laptop, the app opened, and he spoke clearly. Students forget homework. They struggle to organize notes. I built something simple to help us all. It's called StudySmart. He demonstrated reminders, note sharing, and assignments tracking. To his surprise, silence filled the hall, not laughter. Some students leaned forward with interest. A few even clapped. At the end of the fair, teachers announced the winners. Third place went to a robot project. Second place to a chemistry model. First place, the principal declared, goes to Daniel Parker for StudySmart. Gasps filled the room. Daniel froze. His mother's hands flew to her mouth, tears rolling down her cheeks. For the first time, Daniel wasn't the poor kid with broken shoes. He was the winner. Winning gave Daniel more than a certificate, it gave him confidence. A local newspaper wrote a short article about his project. High school student builds app to help classmates. That single headline spread farther than Daniel imagined. Emails began arriving, teachers asking if they could use it, students wanting to download it. And for Daniel, this was only the beginning. The school fair victory was only the spark. After the newspaper article, Daniel's inbox flooded with requests. Teachers from nearby schools wanted to try his app, StudySmart. Some parents wrote encouraging notes telling him to keep going. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt seen not for his shoes but for his mind. Yet success came with new struggles. The app still crashed often. Daniel had no money for servers, no professional computer, and certainly no team. But he had something more powerful than money, determination. Every day followed the same rhythm. School in the morning. Helping his mother with chores in the evening. Coding until midnight. The laptop keys grew warm under his fingers. His eyes burned, but his dream burned brighter. Sometimes he fell asleep on the desk, his cheek resting on the keyboard. His mother would cover him with a blanket, tears in her eyes. One day, his school principal called him to the office. "Daniel, there's someone here to meet you," the principal said. Inside waited a man in a grey suit, Mr. Thompson, a local businessman. "I read about your app," he said, shaking Daniel's hand. "It's simple but clever. I want to help you launch it properly." Daniel blinked. "Launch? But I don't have money for that." "That's where I come in," Mr. Thompson replied with a smile. "I'll invest. You focus on building." With Mr. Thompson's small investment, Daniel bought a second-hand but faster computer and rented space on real servers. He polished StudySmart, adding cleaner design, fixing bugs, and making it available for both phones and computers. When the updated version launched, downloads skyrocketed. At first, hundreds. Then thousands. Within months, millions of students were using StudySmart across the country. But success didn't erase the past. One day, Daniel walked into a coffee shop wearing a modest but new suit. At a nearby table sat the same boys who had once mocked his shoes. They stared in shock as people recognized Daniel, asking for photos, calling him the young genius. The bullies whispered among themselves. One finally muttered, We used to laugh at him." Daniel walked past them, pausing just long enough to say softly, "Thank you for the motivation." He didn't smile, didn't gloat. He simply walked away, leaving them speechless. StudySmart expanded beyond schools. Universities adopted it. Companies started using Daniel's organization features for work projects. At just 21, Daniel stood on the stage of a global tech conference. The spotlight blinded him, but the cheers reminded him how far he'd come. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host announced, "please welcome the founder of StudySmart, the youngest self-made billionaire of our time." The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. Daniel took a deep breath, looked at the audience, and then thought of his mother sitting in the front row, her eyes glistening with pride. He stepped to the microphone. "I was once the boy with torn shoes. I was the kid who ate alone at lunch. I was shamed for things I couldn't control. But I never gave up. If you're sitting here today thinking you're not good enough, remember this. It doesn't matter what shoes you wear, it matters how far you're willing to walk in them." The hall roared with applause. His mother wiped her tears, whispering, "That's my son." Years later, when Forbes interviewed Daniel in his glass-walled office, they asked him, "What do you keep on your desk as a reminder of your journey?" Daniel opened a small drawer and pulled out a pair of old, torn shoes, the very ones kids had mocked. "These," he said softly, "because they remind me where I started and why I'll never stop." The interviewer smiled. From shamed kid to billionaire. Truly inspiring. And Daniel simply replied, "The world laughed at me once, but now they use what I created." The poor kid with old shoes and a faded uniform had risen, not just to wealth but to greatness, leaving behind a legacy that inspired millions.